Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of history's absolute coolest yet most maddening architectural mysteries, the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon. I mean, just the name alone paints this cinematic, almost impossibly gorgeous picture in your head, right? But as we comb through the evidence together, you're going to see that the line between cold hard fact and total mythological fantasy is razor thin. And honestly, trying to untangle it might just change how you look at ancient history altogether. So I want you to picture this. Imagine a lush, thriving oasis that literally defies the harsh, sun-baked landscape of the ancient Middle East. And we're talking about a feat pulled off nearly 2,600 years ago. It was such a mind-blowing vision of life, just totally conquering the desert, that it cemented the site as one of the legendary seven wonders of the ancient world. Just hold that image in your mind for a second. A vibrant, green mountain bursting out of the flat desert sand. Now, to even wrap our heads around how a marvel like this could exist, we gotta look at the city itself. Welcome to the golden age of Babylon. Under the rule of King Nebuchadnezzar II, this civilization was practically swimming in unimaginable wealth. They were already famous for these massive, impenetrable city walls, sprawling palaces, and grand temples. They were true masters of advanced ancient engineering. So if any civilization had the resources, the sheer power, and the technical chops to pull off the impossible, it was definitely them. But here's the thing, the real motivation behind this massive project wasn't military or economic. It was purely emotional. Think about the stark, jarring contrast between the flat, dusty desert of Babylon and the lush, green, mountainous homeland of the king's wife, Queen Amytis. As the famous story goes, she was incredibly homesick. She just desperately missed the green mountains she grew up in. So Nebuchadnezzar supposedly built these magnificent gardens specifically for her. And guys, this wasn't just some cute little courtyard garden to cheer her up. No way. This was an imposing, skyscraping paradise built entirely to cure a queen's homesickness. Talk about setting an impossibly high bar for a romantic gift, right? Like, think of the sheer ambition it takes to look at a sprawling, arid desert and go, you know what? I'm gonna literally build a mountain of green just for the woman I love. It was the ultimate grand gesture that fundamentally defied the laws of nature in that region. Let's break down the actual anatomy of this wonder because it's absolutely breathtaking. We are talking giant stone terraces stacked one on top of the other, kind of like a massive puzzle, with cascading waterfalls spilling down the sides. Imagine walking under exotic, towering trees, surrounded by brilliant flowers, fruit orchards, and perfectly shaded walkways to block out that harsh desert sun. And the craziest part? These weren't local weeds. These were rare, exotic plant species painstakingly gathered from every single corner of the massive Babylonian Empire and hauled to this one spot. Now, you might be sitting there wondering, how on earth do we know all these super specific details about the plants and the layout? Well, it's all thanks to ancient Greek and Roman historians like Strabo, Diodorus Siculus, and Philo. They left behind these incredibly awestruck, detailed written accounts. And they didn't just casually mention it in passing. They described the exact dimensions of the massive stone pillars and the specific watering mechanisms. They painted this rich, unforgettable picture of a meticulously designed oasis that completely blew away anyone who wrote about it. But keeping this paradise alive, that required an absolute engineering marvel. I mean, think about it. First, they had to pull massive amounts of water straight from the Euphrates River. Then they had to use some seriously advanced ancient irrigation mechanics to lift that water continuously, all the way up to the highest stone terraces. Historians think they might have used massive chain pumps or even early versions of the Archimedes screw. Just imagine the sheer, mind-boggling mechanical genius it took to essentially pump a river uphill in the ancient world every single day, just to keep those exotic plants from drying out. Because of this unmatched engineering, it was an absolute triumph of human ingenuity over nature. It became this spectacle that amazed travelers from across the entire ancient world. People would travel ridiculous distances just to stand there in complete awe of this impossible desert oasis. It stood as a towering monument to what humanity could actually pull off if you had enough wealth, mechanical brilliance, and, well, devotion. It just goes to show that even 2,600 years ago, we were actively trying to bend the environment to our will. Okay, so here is where our historical investigation takes a very sharp, very unexpected turn. Everything we've talked about so far sounds perfectly logical, it's wonderfully romantic, and it's incredibly well documented by those foreign historians we just mentioned. But as we get into the great Babylonian mystery, Well, we realize there is a massive, fundamental missing piece to this giant puzzle. Get ready for the twist. There are absolutely zero mentions of this place in ancient Babylonian records. None. Which is wild, right? Think about it. The Babylonians kept meticulous clay tablet records for literally everything. I'm talking mundane grain sales, daily sheep taxes, you name it. Yet somehow absolutely nothing mentions building a massive sky-high garden for the queen. Despite the insane engineering required and all those detailed accounts from Greek and Roman writers, not a single stone tablet, royal decree, or accounting receipt from Babylon itself confirms these gardens ever existed. So we are left staring at this glaring lack of local evidence, and it brings us to a massive cliffhanger. We have to ask, did the Hanging Gardens really exist? Or were they just an incredible legend? Was this whole thing just a really enduring myth dreamt up by foreign travelers telling tall tales? Or is the physical proof just sitting out there, lost beneath the desert sands, waiting to be unearthed? It really challenges how we view history itself. And it reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful stories are simply the ones we want to believe the most. What do you think? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're totally bypassing the standard history books to dig into one of antiquity's absolute greatest cold cases. Not a missing person, mind you, but a missing monument. I'm so glad you're joining me for this because we're about to unravel a historical mystery that has literally puzzled scholars for centuries. I mean, we all know the epic stories of the ancient wonders, right? But what actually happens when the physical evidence just doesn't match the legend? Well, let's find out. It's kind of an uncomfortable question to ask, but what if everything we've been taught about this iconic wonder is just fundamentally flawed? Did the Hanging Gardens of Babylon actually even exist? I know, it almost sounds ridiculous to ask. We've all grown up hearing about this lush, elevated paradise, this absolute masterpiece of ancient engineering. But as we dig a little deeper into the actual historical record, we genuinely have to ask if this magnificent structure was real or if we've all just bought into a brilliantly disguised ancient myth. So, to set the scene for you, let's quickly recap the core mystery here. Out of all the original 7 wonders of the ancient world, from the massive Great Pyramid of Giza to the Colossus of Rhodes, the Hanging Gardens are the only one totally, completely devoid of physical proof. We've got ruins, we've got foundations, or at least really solid contemporary accounts for the other 6. But for the Hanging Gardens, we have absolutely nothing tangible. It's a striking anomaly, right? It practically begs for an explanation. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, Digging Up Babylon. What did they find? So, for decades, archaeologists have literally turned over the soil of Babylon. And these intensive excavations, they were incredibly successful in a lot of ways. I mean, they unearthed magnificent, massive walls and sprawling grand palaces that totally confirm Babylon was this thriving, super wealthy metropolis. But, and this is a massive but, when searching for the gardens themselves, they came up completely empty. There are no specialized foundations for massive trees, no complex irrigation pipes, absolutely zero definitive evidence matching those legendary descriptions. It is just historically baffling that such a huge, world-renowned structure could simply vanish into thin air without leaving a single brick, a single pipe, or even a foundation trace in the dirt. Just imagine the sheer frustration for modern archaeologists. You uncover this bustling ancient city, you painstakingly map out its streets and temples, but you miss its most famous landmark entirely. The complete absence of physical evidence, right there in Babylon, is honestly the ultimate archaeological headache. And this archaeological dead end, it creates a massive plot twist in our investigation. It forces us to entirely rethink the established narrative. I mean, if we have absolute certainty about the layout of ancient Babylon, and the gardens just aren't there, we are left with one glaring question. Where on earth were they? Is it actually possible that an entire wonder of the world was misplaced by history? No way, right? Well, that brings us right to Section 2, the Nineveh theory, an alternative location. Modern historians have actually proposed a pretty radical alternative. What if the legendary builder wasn't Babylon's king Nebuchadnezzar at all, but was actually the Assyrian king Sennacherib? Now, this isn't just a simple matter of swapping out one king's name for another. Doing this fundamentally changes the culture, the timeline, and the very empire responsible for this engineering marvel. This new theory shifts our entire search hundreds of miles north, straight to Nineveh. Nineveh was the sprawling, super innovative capital of the rival Assyrian Empire. And why does this matter? Well, because the Assyrian Empire actually possessed both the immense resources and the intense engineering ambition you need for such a colossal landscaping project. You see, they weren't just warriors. They were master builders who transformed their environment in ways the Babylonians honestly just weren't known for doing at that specific time. Think about it. To build a suspended, elevated garden, you need water moving against gravity, and you need a lot of it. The Assyrians managed to achieve this with a literal three-pronged engineering masterclass. First, they cut extensive canal networks right through solid rock. Second, they built giant stone aqueducts to transport all that water over vast distances. And third, which is absolutely crucial to the gardens, they deployed advanced water-lifting technology. We are talking about massive, incredibly sophisticated irrigation systems that predated similar Greco-Roman tech by centuries. And the best part is, we don't just have to take ancient text at their word anymore. Today, modern satellite surveys and ongoing archaeological digs are proving this tech existed. Researchers are actively mapping out a vast, highly sophisticated ancient water network all around Nineveh. Literally from space, we can trace the hidden ghosts of ancient Assyrian waterworks. We're talking massive aqueducts that perfectly align with the exact kind of infrastructure you'd need to support a lush, elevated garden in the middle of an arid landscape. Okay, moving on to Section 3, Greek confusion, mistaken identity. So, the crucial question obviously becomes, if the gardens were actually in Nineveh all along, why on earth did the ancient Greeks credit Babylon? Let's look at the evidence like we're a jury in a courtroom. On the Babylon side, the claim relies entirely on later Greek texts, and it is backed by absolutely zero physical ruins. Nothing. Now, look at the Nineveh side of things. We have contemporary Assyrian texts describing these magnificent, elevated gardens, and they perfectly match the massive physical aqueducts being discovered right now by satellites and ground surveys. I'd say the weight of the evidence heavily tilts toward Nineveh, wouldn't you? So how exactly did such a massive mix-up even happen? Honestly, it's likely a classic case of mistaken identity. You have to remember, ancient Greek writers were working with a pretty massive handicap, a time delay of several centuries. By the time they actually sat down to write their histories, both Nineveh and Babylon had already fallen. So, to an outsider writing hundreds of years after the fact, blurring the stories of two legendary Mesopotamian megacities together, it's incredibly easy to do. Ultimately, they ended up translating local, blended myths into what we basically now accept as established history. And that brings us to our final part today, Section 4, the enduring mystery, facts versus speculation. As we wrap up this explainer, we really need to look at what this missing monument teaches us about the nature of history itself. We absolutely must carefully distinguish the confirmed historical facts from the pure storytelling. On one hand, the brilliant ancient engineering of the Assyrians, all those incredible aqueducts and canals, that is a confirmed fact, physically carved into the landscape of Nineveh. But on the other hand, the flawless, elevated paradise, perfectly situated in the heart of Babylon, that remains purely romantic speculation spun by Greek storytellers. Understanding this difference is completely key to studying ancient history without getting totally lost in the mythology. But you know what's really interesting here? Despite the absolute lack of proof in Babylon, the Hanging Gardens still remain firmly on the Seven Wonders list. And why is that? It's because they remain one of humanity's greatest mysteries, and they inspire such deep curiosity. Sometimes the sheer power of a beautiful legend shapes history way more than stone ever could. The very idea of these gardens has inspired artists, writers, and dreamers for literally millennia. It's just an incredible testament to humanity's deep desire to create and to believe in a paradise on earth. So, whether they stood in Babylon, in Nineveh, or maybe only in the vibrant imaginations of ancient poets, this incredible mystery leaves us with one final, totally fascinating thought. If an entire wonder of the world could be misplaced or totally misattributed, how much of our deeply accepted, established past is just waiting to be challenged by the next turn of an archaeologist's spade or the next satellite image? Keep questioning, keep learning, and thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.